Now, continuing with discipline and morale, this goes into a section of the book where he starts talking about their performance. And we're going to take a little bit of a turn here, but I think it's important to bring up. In the initial stages of the war, in October to December of 1987, there were complaints and reports of rape, looting, and wanton destruction indulged in by the IPKF. When a soldier is pushed and led into a blind alley, like the situation in Jaffna, where it suddenly changed from so well tom-tommed peacekeeping operations into a full-fledged battlefield, he feels terribly insecure and starts seeing an enemy all over. So we talked about this earlier. These guys thought they were going on a nice peacekeeping mission, and they put their blue helmets on and, be a referee. Well, the referee gets attacked. Mm-hmm. And this is starting to talk about the psychological effect it has. And they start seeing an enemy everywhere. And this reminds me of when I was in high school, and I was lucky enough to have a bunch of Vietnam vets that were putting me through high school. And when I was in high school, the movie Platoon came out. And of course, I was, all into war and whatnot. So I went and saw the movie Platoon. And one of my teachers that was in Vietnam had seen the movie as well. And I asked him straight up, hey, what'd you think of the movie? And he explained to me in a very solemn way that the movie depicted these Americans going in and, brutalizing these villages and doing horrible things to these villagers. But the way he explained it to me, he said, listen, we'd be in and around a village for 3 or 4 weeks. Mm. And in that 3 or 4 weeks, the Americans, would lose 7 or 8 guys to booby traps. Mm. And meanwhile, the villagers don't hit any booby traps. So they're out walking the same trails in the same areas through the same rice paddies, and the villagers aren't hitting any booby traps. They're not getting blown up. They're not getting killed. So that means they kind of know where they are. Mm. And he said that kind of frustration is exactly what this is talking about right here. I'm going back to it. In an insurgency sparked and sustained by an opponent who is dressed in civilian clothes but shoots and blows him up unseen, suspicion alone takes a vicious turn. When he sees his comrades being killed by innocent-looking civilians blending again into the civilian population, he gets into a rage and anger against the uncertainty and the unseen. At that point, his pent-up tension, welling feeling of helplessness, and burning desire to explode into a release of counter-violence are in frantic search of a tangible object he can master, an object which is weak and helpless itself. What better object than a frightened, weak, cowering woman, an unguarded, wide-open shop, an unresisting, defenseless house and its feeble occupants whose shelter the unseen, deceitful opponent had obtained by whatever means. It is madness, the animal in him that rules momentarily. He is wild, but just for a brief spell. If he can get a hold of himself, or if someone controls him in that moment of crisis, of cathartic explosion, he might in all probability get over his baser instincts. Where this does not happen, then the explosion manifests in counter-assault, rape, loot, and wanton destruction, seeking release from tension, fear, and rage. Education, motivation, communication, and company are good antidotes. Most culprits realize within minutes of their act and repent, weeping like children. I saw an officer with 27 years of service breaking down like this. So that's what happens to people. I think there's so much in that paragraph, this paragraph about this pent-up tension. And we've got to remember that it's extreme in a situation, like this. The tension is extreme. The fear is extreme. The rage is extreme. But, and obviously for those that are listening that are in combat right now, that are deployed overseas, these are things that you have to watch out for. And especially as a leader, you've got to be the person that controls him in the moment of crisis, of cathartic explosion. As a leader, that's got to be what your job is. And also, as you work in businesses as a leader, you've got a sense now that things won't be as dramatic as this, but you can get people that do make mistakes in business. They make ethical mistakes, they make moral mistakes because they feel that pressure and they want to lash out and they make mistakes. And you've got to get them through those moments. You got to pay attention to it. It is under these circumstances, back to the book, it is under these circumstances of total uncertainty, initial disorientation, sudden violence, inability to communicate because there was language differences, and lack of effective control and education that excesses were committed by a few. But the command and leadership chain rapidly gathered their brood once again within the warmth of their moral influence and disciplinary binding. Inquiries were instituted and disciplinary action taken against the defaulters. Warped minds had to be weeded out, but there were not very many. After February to March of 1988, the incident rates dropped to almost zero. So they were able to get control of the situation, to weed it out, get rid of the sadists and the folks that couldn't control themselves. But this is the type of pressure that you see military people under, and especially in these counterinsurgency operations like we've had for the last 10 or 15 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, where you have a local populace, you have IEDs, you have indirect fire mortars, and guys are getting killed. And where do you place the rage? Where does it come out? And that is a huge challenge for leadership to try and keep that in check to the best of your ability.